Hi again, guys. Once again, James here with another video. This time, it's the Eye of the World discussion video, which you know because you clicked on the title that said Eye of the World discussion video. Spoilers, please don't watch if you've not read the book or if you care to read the book in the future. I'm not going to hold that up for this whole video because even though it's a paperback, it is big and it's just awkward in my hands. So I've got over here a list of 8 discussion points that I want to talk about when it comes to Eye of the World by Robert Jordan. I'm just going to go through them and see how long this video is. I can't edit it, so if it's really long, sorry about that. So first of all, in my other video, I alluded to this book being a real struggle for me to read. The history behind that is I was introduced to this book when I was 13, 14 years old. I'm now 27, so it's taken me like 14 years just to read this one book. Obviously, I haven't been reading it consistently for 14 years, trying desperately to end it, but I've had 2 or 3 different attempts to read it over that time. The first time I read it, it was actually split up into 2 books, because they did, it must have been in the early 2000s when I first discovered it, but they split off. I don't know if they did it for the whole series because the series wasn't finished at that time. I don't know if they did it for all of the books that were out, but they split the first book into 2 parts in an attempt to sell it as a YA thing because it's got teenage characters in it. But there is not a YA book by any regard. Like, I can see why as a teenager I was not able to read it because I was not willing to sit down for that long, but they split it up into 2 books. I always managed to read the first book, which covers the first half of the book, up to a moment where Perrin, one of the main characters, becomes he becomes a wolf brother is the term for it, which basically means that he is able to psychically communicate with wolves. That's where the second book picks up of that 2-parter, and so the first book would have been about that much of it, and then like Wolf Brother onwards is the second one. I always gave up when it got to the Wolf Brother stuff because the padding is real. The padding begins. This is going to be like my first real point. I alluded to the second act in my review. I said the second act is full of padding, and that is true. So basically, what happens in the book is in the first act, all of the party is together and they flee Emmonsfield, which is the village of the main characters, and their ultimate goal is to go to Tarvalon, which is the home of the Aes Sedai. The first half of the book is about them running away from the Dark One's army, all together. Basically, they're all together, and then it culminates in this escape chase scene in a place called Shadar Logoth, which is a cursed city. It's really cool, actually. The city is really cool and really creepy, and it has this super weird entity. I think it's called Marshadar. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, Wheel of Time fans. I think it's called Marshadar, but it's like this mist that envelops the city, and if you go in it, it fucking consumes your being and your fucking soul. And that's a brilliant villain for that part of the book. So basically, the party gets split up at that point, and then we have 3 different plot lines going on. So we have Moiraine, who's like the wizard, and her friend Lan, who is like... He's a super soldier, basically. He's a warder, which means he's bound to protect her, and he shares some of her magic to make him a better sword fighter. With them is Nynaeve, who is I guess you could call her sort of a witch doctor. So it's called a wisdom. Basically, she's a healer, soothsayer of the village, who comes along for reasons. So she goes off with them to try and find the others, basically, because the 3 guys are the most important to find. So Rand, who is the main character, and Matt, his friend, get separated on their own with a guy called Tom Merrilin, who is like a super fun, moustache blowing. Basically, he's a bard. He's a juggler, entertainer, storyteller, singer, that kind of guy. They go off with him, and then Perrin goes off with Egwene, who is like Rand's sort of love interest friend from back home. So that's the three groups. The Nynaeve, Moiraine and Lan plotline, whilst being the most sort of, you would think is the one that would follow the main plot the most, is not really brought up in the second act at all. We start off the second act with Perrin and Egwene as they go off and just randomly get into shenanigans. They meet this guy called Elias who can talk to wolves, and Perrin can also talk to wolves because reasons, I guess. He just can. So he didn't know that. So there's a whole thing of like him like, oh, I don't want to be this wolf boy, but he ends up being wolf boy. So that happens for a little while until they have another detour with like traveling people who are called Tinkers, and they're essentially Romany Gypsy type traveling people. They go around looking for, like, their thing is they're looking for an ancient song that will save the world or something. I'm not sure if that's all going to come up later. I hope it does, because it would make this bit worth reading about. So they have some shenanigans there for a little while. And the most important thing that happens in this whole bit is that they learn about this story that is being passed around of this warrior woman, like, was found near death, and she grabbed a like tinker guy and was like, you must tell them there's a massive threat to the eye of the world, which is obviously the title of the book. So that's what they learn, that, but they don't really pay attention to it, and then they just faff about and end up having a fight with these guys called White Cloaks, who are random religious fanatics. I'm not 100% sure why they have a fight with them, because like I don't get. I think it's because, no, I remember. So the White Cloaks attack the wolves that they're traveling with. So Perrin loses his fucking shit and kills some of them, and then they get arrested by them, and that's where their story sort of ends in the middle. And then we cut to Rand and Matt, which is probably one of the most egregious bits of padding I've ever seen. They go from village to village in order to meet up. In order to get to this place called Camlin, which is where everyone is ostensibly heading to in the second act. So they're all heading towards Camlin, and Matt has stolen this dagger from Shadar Logoth, which is making him fucking paranoid and insane. And Rand and him go to village after village and just get like harassed by farmers and chased by dogs, and like there's a bit where they're cornered in a tavern by, like, they're called Dark Friends. They're like the human servants of the Dark One, who is like obviously the big bad guy. So they spend about 200 pages just doing that. There's not a lot of point to it after the first time. This is what I meant in my review when I said, you know, if you're gonna be repeating things that happen, just stop it. Like, there's so many. There's like 3 or 4 scenes in a row of them hitching a ride with a farmer on a wagon, and this is where I'm pretty sure the duplicate paragraph came in. Like, 2 different farmers tell them exactly the same thing about what's going on. So they do all that, and they don't really learn anything along the way. So Rand like at one point channels magic to destroy a wall in order for them to escape. And that's a very bad thing in this universe, because basically the way the magic system works is that it's split into male and female halves, and the male half is polluted. So any man that does magic inevitably goes insane and kills loads of people. So only women can be magic users, essentially, in this world. So Rand does that by accident, but he doesn't realise that he's done it. So that's the sort of significant plot point. The rest is just padding to get the length up. Okay, like there's some character development along the way with Matt and Rand, but it's not hugely brilliant. What is hugely brilliant, though, is the prologue of the book. That is one thing that's not padding. I've tried a couple of times to record a video about my general thoughts on prologues, and it's never come out really that well because I don't have huge amounts to say about it. But I'll say it here. The prologue in Eye of the World is great because for a long time at the start of the book, we're introducing characters and we're getting a feel of the calm side of the world. But that is not what the series is going to end up being. It's not what it escalates to. And I think the prologue is brilliant because it centers around this guy called Luz Theron Telamon, who is the dragon. He's like the most powerful male magic user in the world. This is set in a time before the magic had become corrupted. So he's the most powerful magic user in the world, and he's basically, now the taint has taken hold of the male side of magic, he's gone fucking mad and essentially causes a magic storm that destroys the entire world and changes it forever. And then that's great because all of that is stuff that is going to be thematically relevant later on. It's going to be tonally consistent with what happens much later on in this book, and I assume the rest of the series. But for a long time in the main story, it doesn't happen. So it's good that the prologue is there to give you a taste of what's to come. And that is what a prologue should be used for, not for randomly info dumping shit. One thing I wasn't a big fan of, though, was too many dream sequences. For a long time in this book, the main three guys, Rand, Matt, and Perrin, are haunted by dreams of this guy called Baalzamon, who is, he says he is the Dark One, like the Dark Lord, but I don't think he is. He's probably just like a manifestation. But he just keeps showing up, trying to figure out which one of them is the reincarnated dragon, because basically that's the main cut of the story, that one of them is suspected to be the dragon reborn, and he's like fleeing, so that no one knows which one of them it is, but it's definitely one of them. So they're haunted by these dreams, and they go on and on and on. Every time Rand is having a dream sequence, it's like paragraph after paragraph of mysterious imagery, like, he was trapped in a maze of mirrors and smoke, and it's like, after 2 or 3 of those, like every time they came up, I was like, oh man, like this is like 4 or 5 to 10 pages that it's just pointless guff, because like there is a bit of a Freddy Krueger thing where like he gets injured in the dream and he becomes injured in real life, but it's just unnecessary. Like after the first couple, like we get it, you know, you can have him then wake up and go, he dreamt of Baalzamon again. You can summarize the dreams. We don't have to live out every dream sequence with him. That is, yeah, so there's too many dream sequences. What are some other negatives that I can pick out while we're on a negative vein? Here's one. Okay, so here's one. I mentioned in the review that the main love interests for Rand were pretty well handled. There's some simmering romance stuff between him and Egwene that I don't know if it's going to carry on, but it's like an on and on again, off again sort of thing, like a will they, won't they situation. But we're introduced to a character called Elaine, who is like the princess of Andor, is the kingdom they're in. So Rand meets her by way of shenanigans when he accidentally falls into the palace walls. Like he climbs the walls in order to get a look at this prisoner that the Aes Sedai have captured called Loghain, who's a false dragon, who is basically a guy who can channel magic, but he's not the reincarnation of the dragon. But like he says he is, so he amasses an army and shit. So he's been captured, and Rand's like, oh well, let's have a look at that, because why not? It's always something fun to do. So he climbs up the palace walls, not knowing it's the palace, and falls into the walls because he's a dumbass. So he's found by Elaine, who is the princess, and there is some romantic, very, very early days of romance between them. It's definitely not insta-love, which is great. I'm hoping that that's going to build for the rest of the series and that it's handled pretty well. I assume it will be. We'll see if I when I get round to the rest. The one romance that is not good is between Nynaeve and Lan, who is the warder. So Nynaeve she has like a contested relationship with Lan. Like she's always trying to one up him in hunting or stealth or something because she wants to impress him, I guess. But he's always like very blasé and very aloof about everything, and that infuriates her. And a lot of the stuff with their romance is sort of really well handled. Like you can see how it's like she's developed a crush on this guy and it's not sure if he returns the feelings or anything. So that's all well done. But then right at the end of the book, when they're like traveling through super dangerous territory, she just like fucking breaks down and is like, are you going to marry me? And when he's like, I don't know, probably not. Like she has a breakdown and she cries and she's like, oh, he's a bastard. Like, I don't know, like they've only known each other for like a few weeks. And I get that it's probably one of those things where like dating doesn't exist. So it is like a we'll get married if we're in love with each other sort of deal. But I mean, it was a bit out of nowhere. It's like a romance out of nowhere, like at the end, like, oh, I know we're fighting for our lives in a fucking twisted hellscape land, but should we get married after this? And he's like, no. And she's like, fucking men. It was really weird. A bit nonsensical. It could have waited, I think, until at least the second book before we start bringing that stuff up. But maybe it gets better after that. I don't know. But it just seemed a bit weird to bring it up out of nowhere in this instance. What else do I have to say? That's it, really. I mean, the only other thing to mention is like how just it bears repeating, like how amazing the world building is. There's so much history and depth that's told through stories and legends of this world that just really captured my imagination and made me want to learn more about them. And it's great. It's like where Tolkien develops his world through songs and things like that. Robert Jordan develops them through stories. Like the character of Tom Merrilin is called a Glee Man, and his job is essentially to go around the world telling tales of legends and daring do, and we get to hear some of those stories and it all sounds really amazing. There's lots of good faction building, like the White Cloaks are a faction that have been built up to be kind of antagonistic. There's a mysterious race of, like, I guess they're desert people. It's like a wasteland desert people called the Aiel, that we don't know a lot about, but we've heard some things about them. We've heard, obviously, the kingdoms have been built up and like the Queen of Andor and all that, and this is all started from such a small place, which is, you know, like these guys are in a village and they're in danger, so they've got to run away. So it's really well done, and there's so much under the surface that I think you can dig into, and that's why I had such a problem summarizing the book in such a small length of time. Like when I do a review, when I talk about a plot summary, I don't want to talk about all the events that happen. Like I don't want to be like, oh, 3,000 years ago the dragon destroyed the world and Rand is there and he has been potentially reincarnated as the dragon, and there's a wizard society. Like there's too much to really explain accurately what the story is about in a log line. It's very difficult to boil down like that, because when you say just the basics of what it is, like it's a centuries old, like it's a millennia old battle between good and evil. Like it just sounds so generic, but there's something about it that's just so original and fresh, that I can't wait to dig into the rest of the series. Obviously I can wait, because I, one, don't own any of the other books yet, and two, they're super long and I don't know when I'm going to get around to actually reading them. But I'm genuinely excited to go into the next one now, like having finally conquered the Everest of my reading life. Like this is a book I've been trying to read for so fucking long, and I finally did it. And yeah, I'm thrilled that I enjoyed it, and I'm really interested to see how it goes on. So this video is now about 21 minutes or so, so that's a good length of time, guys. So you've had enough of me this week. There might be a bonus video at some point in the future. Probably not this week, though. Next time you see me, we're going to be talking about Dune, so get your sand shoes on for that. And I'll see you then. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like if you like this. And oh, of course, let me know what you thought of the fucking Wheel of Time, Eye of the World, book 1, below if you've read it. And yeah, that's really it now. So I'll see you later. Bye.